Hello and welcome back to Please Don't Eat the Sage Season 2. Today's guest claims to not partake in magical rituals, but that's just her triple earth sign talking. As an artist with a background in psychology, she offers the perfect blend between enchantment and practicality, as is evident in her best-selling affirmation decks and actionable classes for creatives. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to cut the woo out of woo-woo while still maintaining a spark of alchemy, stay tuned. Right. So for today's episode, we have Gabriella Rosie, who is a creatrix, a artist, and honestly, one of my favorite people to follow online. And she is actually the reason that the Total Betty Goddess deck came to fruition. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. She is basically a creating maven online who helps to coach others into their own creative power. Welcome, Gabby. And do you want to start off by just letting us know what you want to tell us about your life and your vibe and your magic that you're creating currently?
Totally. I mean, I feel like you did a better job of introducing me than I ever will. I never ever know what to say. I generally just tell people that I'm an artist, but that leads to like so many more follow-up questions because it's not a normal kind of job. But basically my dream was always to be able to make it so whatever things I want to create becomes my job. So I've just given myself a really impossible job to describe to people. But yeah, I make cards, I paint, I do ceramics, I do whatever feels really fun to me at the time. And through the magic of the internet, we can share that with other people and we can sell that and bring people into that. And yeah, that's the stuff that I'm obsessed with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny because I invited you on this podcast and I'll do a little share. And I said that I wanted you to come on and talk about sort of like rituals and magic. And you responded saying that you're not really ritualistic. And I get what you're saying, but I feel like we're going to dive into this conversation. I'm going to dig up some of your rituals. I mean, for instance, you have your Creatrix Coven. So this season of the podcast is all about like my little witch baby journey. And so it's infused with elements of magic, but you kind of do it with your own style. So I understand why your response was that that's not really your thing, but I think that you definitely have things that you set up in your day to allow yourself for creativity. So let's talk a little bit about maybe not rituals, but things. Oh my gosh, I have kittens playing in the background. If anyone's watching the video element of this podcast, feel free to take a drink every time the kittens like jolt across the screen. But let's talk a little bit about the things that help to set you up for your creativity. And I'm sure that they ebb and flow, but like what makes you feel in your creative vibe?
It's funny, I was literally talking about this at my ceramic studio yesterday with somebody, how I am just always going to rebel against any kind of rule. So even something that can be a ritual and can start out in a way that I'm just doing it because it helps, it supports me, as soon as it becomes too much of this is what I have to do to feel creative, or this is what I have to do to start my day, I will instantly rebel against it. And with pottery, it's like it's such a methodical process. But every time, like as soon as I find myself becoming aware of like, you have to do things in this A, B, C way, I'll be like, no, I'm going to reinvent it and make it different so I just feel something. So I think that's very much what I do around things with creativity and practices and having those rituals is I'll find a rhythm with something and then as soon as I'm aware of it, I like to shake it up. So I don't know, I guess the things that make me feel most inspired and most creative are just being aware and being available for the things I know I am pulled towards. So the inspirations I know are like, this is an area that's turning me on, allowing myself to just explore that and to go really deep into it and maybe take myself to the point where I do get bored of it and do rebel against it. But for me, where the energy feels the most potent is when I obsess with something and do that thing all day until I'm able to create it in the way that I like the way it looks or I like the way it feels. It's really soaking in the feeling of it, I think. It's very hard to explain, but
no, I mean, honestly, I think that answer just embodies why you are such a great creative artist, because like you are constantly innovating and figuring out a different way to do stuff and looking at things in a different way. And so I love that you have rituals and then as soon as you're aware of them, you change them, because like that's the makings of an innovator. like it's like, oh, this
Yeah.
is the way that we've been doing things and it's working, but like, what else can we do? How can we shake this up? And what other ways can we find that work as well? So I think that's beautiful.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, that's like how creativity works, right? Like if we're doing the same thing, we can't create something new from it. So being comfortable in areas of uncertainty, of where you don't know the outcome, of where you don't know what thing you're even learning, that is what's puts you in the position to be inventive and have to think on your toes. And yeah, as soon as I find myself getting a little bit too comfortable, that's when I start to feel myself stagnate, or I'm just having the same kind of ideas. So yeah, that's definitely become clearer and clear to me over the years of like, how can I use that rebellious energy in an actually like constructive way, rather than me just being like, fuck it, I'm not doing any of this stuff just because I said so, but actually like, how can I be rebellious in a way that allows me to approach things differently or have more excitement and more fulfillment in things?
Yeah. And I think that honestly, that's one of my favorite things about following you is that you do have a way of kind of taking things like, for example, the rebellion and making them like channeling them in a healthy way. Because I relate as an Aquarius rising, I do have that element of rebelling against what's expected as me as well. And so I know what you're talking about, and that that can go into a very unproductive rebellion where you're just like, no, I'm not doing that. And like then it's the end of
Yeah,
the story, and like you're not necessarily doing something better, but you're now not doing the thing that was expected of you. And so the fact that you can kind of transmute it and make it into something else is like, honestly, it's creating alchemy, which is a form of
hmm
magic. And it's a very popular phrase around your shop with the alchemist
love it.
attire
Yeah,
and necklaces and things
all
like
my shit.
that. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you offer, because you do offer so much. So I kind of would like to kind of take it back, because to me, your origin story for me is the bad bitch affirmation deck. That's how I discovered you, and that's how everything kind of started. Even from an outside observer, I know you had shops online and stuff like that beforehand, but it feels like that was kind of the beginning of this chapter. Does that resonate for you?
Definitely, yeah, for
So
sure.
I know the story behind the bad bitch affirmation deck, but go ahead and tell our audiences about how this gorgeous bad bitch affirmation deck came to be.
I feel like it's one of those stories that I have told or just thought about it myself to try and understand, that we kind of, I'm like, I don't know if I'm changing it in hindsight, because I'm being like, I'm adding new things of like understanding how much that creating that first deck really did change things for me. So I'll try to be as like grounded in it. So I was making art and sharing it online for years, like I had an Etsy shop, I made jewelry, I made like clothing out of cut up vintage bed sheets and Barbie dolls and all crazy stuff. And I'd always share that online, but the internet was like really, really different then. So even though I was making money from the things that I was created, it was purely just, I was just making stuff and I was so excited about the stuff I was making, and I had it in such insane quantities that it only made sense for me to sell that stuff as well. And through that time, I think I got into painting, and I always kept a sketchbook, and I'd write little phrases in the sketchbook to myself of, this is the thing I want to believe, and this is like a thought process or a part of my identity that I wanted to develop. And I was like, well, I'll just put it in like the layers of my painting, and that's what's going to make it become my personality eventually. Don't know where that batshit crazy idea came from, but I still do that.
I mean,
Um,
speaking of
and
magical
yeah, so
rituals,
right, exactly. I'm like, I don't do rituals. She's painting affirmations in canvases, but yeah. So I would share those like scribbles or like those phrases and things that I was saying to myself on my Instagram, which was pretty much just, my
just
friends
started.
and family at that time. Yeah. And then I think I was selling paintings and I wanted to make some business cards, because it was like, I don't know, 2017, and business cards was still relevant in some way then. And on the back of the business cards, you could select like multiple different images to put on them. And I was like, it'll be super cute if I put these little affirmations and these phrases that I've been telling myself. So when I give someone a business card in hopes that they're going to buy one of my paintings, they're probably going to hold on to it longer if it has like this phrase that gives them a little pep up. And then when I made those business cards and shared them online, there were a few people that I knew who like, this is pretty much like an affirmation deck. Like, you do know that's a real thing that exists that people make, but it's so interesting because I think I see this so much in my own creative projects and of other people, of we can make things accidentally. Like, that's probably the way we're going to make most things. We're not going to have like, this is the end goal and this is the exact steps that I'm going to follow to get to it. But if we're just following the things that we're naturally drawn to, we're accidentally going to create really great things. And so that's my biggest permission slip from this story, to keep remembering that in my process now. But yes, I got, I guess, the encouragement from like 5 people on the internet saying this could be a deck, and went through the treacherous process of figuring out how the fuck to make a deck when I had no idea. Like, putting something in production was completely a whole new world to me. Even doing like graphic design and preparing files for production, totally new world for me. So that was a very, very up and down process at the beginning. But yeah, I figured it out. I launched the first deck and it's been pretty fucking crazy ever since.
Yeah. First of all, the idea of taking this thing and not knowing what's going, what you just said of like, that's what kills creativity. It's like, if you're like, I want to create X, and you see the end goal, like you don't see the little ins and outs that you can do along the way that make it that much more creative. So I love that you said that about that. And then of course, this is a great segue into my favorite thing to talk about in regards to you, which is that you are the catalyst for the Total Betty Goddess deck, because you took everything that you learned from creating your deck and you created this amazing online course that just keeps getting crazily better and better and bigger and bigger. And do you have a round of card creator that's currently happening? Because you kind of do it seasonally, right?
Well, now it's ongoing. So now we have a monthly call so people can join whenever they're ready to start making their deck.
Okay. So I definitely want to say to listeners out there, if you are even just have a seedling of an idea of a deck that you've ever wanted to create, Gabby just lays it all out for you. And it's like, it's having like a little, like a big sister or a mentor be like, hey, it's almost like going into high school and you have a big sister that's like, I'm going to show you the ropes.
Oh my God, I love that. Yes.
This is where you're going to eat your lunch for the cool table. And this is where you're going to like get the secret snack. Like, I don't know, like, it's like, it was so handy. And it was probably, I think, the first version of it that I was involved with. So it's so much bigger than it was when I was involved, but it still was just what I needed. Like, it's like, I had this idea, I didn't know how to get it made. And honestly, the best thing about it is that, and this is kind of across the board, what I love about following you is that you're so tapped in to your own, like, whatever we want to call it, divine source, like channel, like whatever information, that you have so much good logical information because you're a Taurus and it's very grounded and very earthy. But the things that I get the most from you are just a random turn of phrase that you'll say that's just kind of in the conversation. So my favorite part about Card Creator, which it was part of the advice, but of the massive amount of information that you gave us with resources and printing and all this other stuff, it was to make sure that you create a deck that you want to talk about for a good amount of time, because you want to make sure that you're not going to get sick of it through the making and then promoting and like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And something about just hearing that made me think to myself, what am I obsessed with talking about right now? And I'd known that I wanted to create a goddess deck, and I knew that I wanted to use popular icons, but I hadn't kind of like made it like packaged a little bit more in my brain. I hadn't gotten that clarity. And the second that you said that, I was like, I am obsessed right now with talking about my nostalgia for the 90s. And then everything made sense from there. And it was like off at the races. And so I think that that's so gorgeous that you are such a great resource for grounded information that, though it's not magical, it is magical. And also these like divine bursts of wisdom that if people are open to it, they can kind of like, it can channel their creativity. And I think that it's such a beautiful purpose that you have here in this incarnation, to like be just not only an artist yourself, but like, for lack of a better word, a muse because you are saying something that triggers something in all these other artists, the thing that makes them continue to be able to create. So that's just beautiful and wonderful and lovely, and I'm so appreciative of it.
I mean, thank you for saying all of that. It's so helpful to see what parts of, you know, whatever I do resonate with people and like pull different parts out of you. And I think what you touched on there is like such a big thing that a lot of aspiring creatives, where people are like, I want to create something, I want to bring something into the world, but I don't know. Like there's, it feels almost like there's this hurdle that we have to jump across. And I think a lot of that comes down to this kind of the dichotomy of trying to figure out like what sells and what do people want, and also what do I want to create, and trying to make those into a cohesive thing. Because the truth is, if you want to sell a product and you want to build a business, or you want to be full-time in your art or whatever it is, you do need to make sure that what you create sells and has an audience of people who are interested in it. But I really, really believe, and I've really found the best way to do that is to make something that you are obsessed with first. And oh, that is like such a big barrier for people to really, really give themselves permission to be like, well, I'm fucking obsessed with goddesses and I'm obsessed with the 90s.
Yeah.
Of course, I can just fuse those things together. And it's in those, you know, it's in those combinations of things that maybe might not be instantly obvious, or is really kind of impossible to do any market research on that. Yeah. But the fact that if you walked into a shop, or if you saw that on someone's social media, you'd be like, instantly add to cart, didn't know this thing could exist, but I'm so glad it does. That's the stuff that no one else can make. That's like your fucking cosmic brilliance, right? That's the thing that I really, really, it just excites me so much that you've gone down the route of allowing yourself to create exactly what it is that you specifically are like, this is the coolest thing.
And I think the great thing about that mindset as an artist is that, I mean, yes, we do hope that to support ourselves with our art, and that stuff does sell, but especially with the first incarnation of the deck, I was just so excited to own it myself that like, I was like, yeah, I'm ordering this for other people to own. And I think it could potentially be something that a lot of people love, but at the same time, I could care less as long as I have this deck in my hands to be able to play with. And so and I mean, I think even like, I mean, Gwen Stefani talks about how she like designs her clothes for stuff that she wants to wear. Like, I feel like anyone that we follow that is in a creative field, they start with, well, I wanted this thing for myself. And then ultimately you're going to find other people that want it as well, that didn't even know that they wanted that.
Totally. And it becomes so much easier to actually sell it because you're already obsessed with the thing.
Yeah.
It's just easy for you to tell people like why it's so good. It's easy for you to want to wear it or want to use it. You don't have to play a marketing or a sales character for the thing. It's just, I made this thing. It's the coolest fucking thing ever. Let me tell you about it. And that's the most attractive energy, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of, you just launched a bunch of new stuff. So what are like the main things that I mean, obviously you're excited about all your creative babies, but like, what are you the most excited about that you've put out in the world recently?
Yeah. So I literally just like a couple of days ago, as we're recording this, just launched my newest deck, Cosmic Brilliance. And that has been, gosh, it was like maybe the longest behind the scenes creative project, especially for a deck. And I think that was so much of just me understanding the concept and what I wanted to get across. But when it grounded and I was like, okay, this is what I want to say, this is what I want this tool to be for people, I created it insanely fast. But I think that's such a different lesson that I'm constantly relearning and constantly like teaching and showing to people as well, is there is no linearity in creativity. So even if it's like, well, I made a deck in a week before, or I had this idea and it turned around like that, that doesn't mean the next one's going to follow the same suit. And actually the most freeing and exciting thing is to just let things take as long as they take, because I had a lot of fun researching and learning everything that I wanted to put into that deck. And it really expanded my own creative project, my own like journey of understanding my own cosmic brilliance and what I am here to share really got solidified through the process. And another thing I love about creating things is the process of making it is transformative for ourselves as well. So as you said, with like, I don't care if anybody else buys this thing as long as I have it, you've also gained so much through the journey of creating that thing. And I feel that so much about this deck. And I have a collection of ceramics coming out that's part of the Cosmic Brilliance collection as well. God, that's just been a whole different world of learning things. Yeah.
So what do you hope that people use Cosmic Brilliance? Like, what kind of tool do you want them to use it for? I mean, obviously everyone has the freedom to use it however they want, but as you were talking about having a visualization, because I mean, I'm sure that if people are listening to this podcast, it's all about new age spirituality and witchcraft and things like that. So like a deck is a great tool for those things. So what is Cosmic Brilliance specifically a tool for?
About a year ago, I launched the Creatrix deck, which is a word that exists all over my world. And I've got it tattooed on my neck. I'm obsessed with it. And that was really about very specific. The idea of that deck is you're in the process of creating something, you're working on a project, or you're wanting to sit down and make some art for that day, but you're feeling in like a sticky spot, or you want a kind of clue that's going to tell you the direction to go. So that deck's very directive of like, this is the action that you should take. And from creating that, I was like, I want to go a little bit deeper on this and like back to the roots of where I guess the energy of creativity is even coming from within us. And the way that I understand it is this thing that I think I've made up called Cosmic Brilliance, which is basically how I see the literal stardust that we're made of. It's all of our life experiences, it's all of our interests, it's everything that forms us as an individual. And when we're able to tap into that and explore it and evolve within who we are as a person, I really see that as like, oh, that is the most powerful understanding that we can have to create the art that's so specifically us. So this deck I really created as a tool for us to connect with who it is that we really, really are, who it is that we want to be, and how those two things are evolving together. And when we give ourselves the permission to explore ourselves in that uniqueness, then we get so much clearer of like, oh, well, this is my style. This is my particular flavor. And now I can channel that into the projects that I create.
I love that. And I love the progression, because we have the bad bitch affirmations that's just kind of pulling you out of a funk. Then we have the Creatrix deck, which is giving you like an inspiration to act. And then we have the Cosmic Brilliance that's really defining who you are and what you're made of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like my goal is to just have my own like library of decks, so no matter what I'm feeling or what I want to feel, I've got a little resource to use.
And I mean, and they're great for those that are listening that are interested in these. Each one of these decks has like a completely different vibe. Like the Bad Bitch affirmation is like, first of all, perfect pair for the Total Bitty Goddess deck. I use them coinciding a lot. I also have a kitten that just knocks something over. And then we have the Creatrix deck, which is like shiny edges and like almost like a dominatrix type vibe to the images. Like it's very, I love that, because and it was one of those things that it's like combining two things that don't seem like they go together, but they actually do because of the person that's infused them into the world. And so I'm like, oh, this is great. I wouldn't have thought to put like creative inspiration and like sort of bondage type lingerie type imagery in the same deck, but it almost has this vibe of like, get to work, like this dominatrix full arm, like I'm gonna crack the whip but you're gonna like it. And then
I mean, creativity to me is like a very sexual thing,
for sure. I mean, it's sacral chakra. Sacral chakra is passion and creativity and sexuality. So yeah, anytime you can have those things go together. And then Cosmic Brilliance, from what I've seen of it, is a little more minimalistic, almost like we're going to let you infuse your own stardust into this.
Exactly. I need to show them online actually somewhere. There was so many through the year process of me having the idea and the concept for that deck. There's so many iterations of what it looked like, and where it started was very, very complicated, very intricate, and it was such a journey of me being like, I don't want to necessarily, obviously there is still, it's in my style, and I think anybody who knows my work can tell that I made it, but I didn't want to project an idea of what I guess my own style is too much on a thing, because the idea is that it is a tool for people to bring out their own expression. And if there's too many, even with colors, I went through so much of like wanting to use colors, and then I did it all black and white and gray, and that felt like a bloody identity crisis almost in making. So I was like, how can I make something that doesn't have pink on it or like some vibrant colors?
Yeah.
But when I was like, what is the goal? Like, what is the purpose of this tool? It isn't to tell people what way it should look. It's to help them bring it out themselves.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, it's such a great arc of like showing that there are so many different elements to even just an individual artist. And yet if you look at these decks, like there still is the through line. You're still like a total authentic Gabby Rosie vibe that is totally like, I mean, that's why you have so many loyal followers that like sell out your shop the second that you launch something, because it's like, we know what to expect from you, and it's always a little bit different, but it always has that same like flavor. So yeah, I love that. Well, dear listeners, if you are unfamiliar with these episodes, we end the conversation around now, but if you want to hear more from Gabby, first of all, if you want to hear more from Gabby, tell us where the folks can find you.
I'm mostly on Instagram at Gabriella Rosie. Yeah, check me out there.
Yeah. And then if you want to hear more from her in this podcast format, we always do a mini episode where we're going to dive into the Total Betty Goddess deck. We're going to give Gabby her own personal goddess pull, and we're going to talk about both what that card means for her and also maybe riff on the 90s nostalgia that's behind the character that plays the card. So if you want to do more about that, stay tuned for that episode. And thank you, Gabby, for being here for this interview.
Thank you so much. Great chat.
Find out more about Gabby by following her on Instagram at Gabriella Rosie. And stay tuned this Thursday for her Total Betty Goddess reading, where we talk 90s nostalgia and the power of artistic transformation. This episode of Please Don't Eat the Sage was brought to you in part by my Patreon members. So I'd like to thank Ashley, Laura, Caitlin, Amanda, and Karen. If you'd like to join their ranks, you can do so over at patreon.com/Michelle Shea. You can also support this podcast by pre-ordering your own copy of the Total Betty Goddess deck, or head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review.